Welcome back to my channel, Starbooze.
The Vatican's most strictly protected the secret has just been broken. Furthermore, Vatican going to make a shocking revelation ripples through each cathedral, each parish as well as each Catholic residence throughout the world. The 14th Pope, Leo I, has at last shattered his eerie silence. Additionally, the words that left his mouth have a billion Catholics who are curious everything they believed to be their knowledge of their belief. This isn't your typical papal declaration. This change is seismic. That has the potential to destroy the structure of the Catholic Church as it exists today. Before I reveal the heartbreaking reality behind the Pope's actual remarks too, need you to click subscribe at this moment, since what you're going to witness is the type of disclosure that the Vatican has been working for decades. Torporous, this narrative will vanish from faster than you can blink. The internet avoid putting it out there. Smash that, then, notification bell and forward this to all of your acquaintances. As the media is already putting in extra hours to bury this bombshell for centuries. Even the Catholic Church, the church was constructed using the customary Latin Mass, a holy ceremony that brought the faithful together straight to God via the ancient Latin prayers that have reverberated in the St. Peter's Basilica's halls throughout time forever. However, a sinister development has been simmering below the golden dome of the Vatican. So explosive that it has maintained in the middle of the night. Pope Leo I was pacing the papal residences, battling a cause that could either save their church or demolish it entirely. The customary Mass is more than just a religious ritual. The beating is the core of true Catholicism, the unbroken thread connecting today's apostles themselves as believers. When you see the clergyman reason chanting in the consecrated host revered Latin language, you're not merely observing a ceremony. You're taking part in the identical mystical experience of martyrs and saints treasured for more than a millennium. Each gesture, each prayer, each a silent moment bears the burden of the total number of prayers of millions of individuals who discovered their salvation in these timeless terms. However, the story takes a dark turn at this point that no one anticipated. Pope Leo XIV keeping quiet about this revered custom wasn't simply exercised diplomatic prudence, it was the fearful hesitancy of a man who was aware of that his subsequent remarks would either the church or divide it in two, in such a manner that the Protestant Reformation appears to be a child. Disagreement behind the elaborate walls of the Vatican ether conflict has been going on between those who feel that the Church needs to adopt modernity at all costs, as well as individuals who would sooner perish than forsake the sacred customs that have kept the faith strong through war, plague, and persecution. Imagine this. Deep within the Vatican records and historical records discuss warnings and prophecies regarding what would occur if the Church renounced its holy tongue. Mystics and saints throughout history have mooted about a period when the pious would be dispersed, like sheep in the absence of a shepherd, when the fundamentals of faith would disintegrate due to the sacred wars made commonplace, and the 14th Pope, Leo I, has read these predictions. Their weight has been felt by him. Putting pressure on his shoulders as if the weight of the whole world. The Pape's recent declaration did more than simply acknowledge the value of custom. It showed something much more startling, something that will chill you to the bone when you fully comprehend the ramifications. When he discussed the necessity of unity and the significance of Mass in contemporary, he wasn't always merely making a declaration. He was admitting that the Church is perched on a cliff of the worst crisis it has encountered ever since Christ's own crucifixion. Consider the implications of this for a moment. The individual who says he is the direct, infallible St. Peter's successor voice of God on earth, recently acknowledged that there is such division within the Catholic Church, so shattered, so deeply flawed that he himself is unable to fix it. The conventional Mass discussion isn't only about vernacular versus Latin languages, it concerns the essence of Christianity itself, concerning whether the belief that Western civilization can endure within a society that has forgotten theology. However, this is the section that will send shivers down your spine with your understanding of how profound this is a conspiracy. The Pope's remarks regarding specific limitations and rules are more than merely administrative rules. These are the last-ditch efforts of church leaders who have lost their way of its own flock. Conventionalist globally Catholics have been covertly planning, establishing networks of priests operating underground and devout people who prefer to celebrate Mass in secret chapels rather than jeopardize their convictions. They have been getting ready for this. The Pope is aware of the moment. When Pope Leo XIV talked about having space for both, he wasn't at both the traditional and modern Mass. Making a generous concession. He was attempting to avoid a total split that would result in the 1054 Orthodox split. Appeared to be a small family dispute. Vatican-based intelligence sources simply that the whole diocese has been saying that it would secede from Rome if Mass is prohibited entirely. Bishops have been holding confidential gatherings, priests have been creating backup plans, and millions of Catholics have been retreating in silence there. Parishes' financial assistants disregard their sacred customs. The crisis is devastating. Emotional. Can it be emphasized enough? Consider yourself a Catholic who has discovered deep spiritual significance in the traditional customs of the Latin Mass, who has had times of heightened awareness and intimacy with heavenly through these ancient merely to be informed that your most in some ways sacred religious experiences are contentious or out of date. Consider the elderly Catholics who received their religious education from their parents and Latin prayers uttered by grandparents while evading persecution by the communists, than learning that their own church believes that these identical prayers are barriers to harmony. This goes beyond religion, ceremony. This has to do with identity, about bellowing regarding the essential enquiry into whether tradition has any worth in a society fixated with advancement and evolve. The customary Mazambolus is something that our contemporary the planet is nearly lost. The acknowledgement that certain things are also too valuable to be changed, too sacred to beat, too holy to be made. Modernized, practical for modern sensibilities. The Pope's declaration has sparked a psychological tremor that continues to causing reverberations through Catholic communities around the world. Traditionalist organizations that have invested decades of battling for acceptance nextly discover themselves in the strange status of being recognized but not genuinely approved. They are being presented with a seat at the table, but only in the event that they consent to consume the remains of what was once their own heritage. The treachery goes so profound that many are wondering if this Pope can be regarded as a rightful heir to the apostolic custom. In the meanwhile, progressive Catholics are going through their own kind of emergency. They believe they had conquered the eternal conflict within the Church, that the times of ancient rites and Latin chanting, where it lasts behind them. The Pope's recognition of the customary Mass seems like a step into the past. They've been trying all their lives to get away. They observe the ornate garments, the incense, the official rituals as obstacles that separate regular folks from as remnants. With a hierarchical structure, God-fat disregarded women, devalued the impoverished, and gave ritual precedence over real spiritual development. However, this is where the narrative real explosion, where the true plot starts to appear out of the darkness. The disparity about the customary Mass isn't merely a theological dispute. It's a proxy conflict for Christianity's future itself. On the one hand, there are Catholics who feel that timeless truths necessitate timeless modes of communication, that the sacrosanct has to be shielded from the damaging consequences of cultural relativism and influence from the secular world. Catholics are on the other side, who think that faith needs change in order to continue to be applicable, that the gospel message is too significant to be caught in outdated traditions and archaic languages. The battle's historical background manstressed how serious the situation is. Following the Second Vatican Council, and the Catholic Church took action in the 1960s. Deliberate choice to adopt the modern universe, to let in and open its windows clean air. The Latin Mass was mostly discarded in favor of colloquial. The priest turned to face the gathering rather than the altar, and the whole Catholic environment worship changed from being enigmatic toned transcendent to reachable and collective for a lot of Catholics. The adjustments were freeing. At last, they were able to comprehend what was being expressed. They may take part more. Actively participating in the liturgy, and they sense it as though the Church was at last recognizing their worth as human beings with emotions as opposed to passive or clerical authority beneficiaries. The Mass become increasingly democratic, more equitable, and more sensitive to the 1960s social movements that were demanding and questioning the hierarchy. It won't be celebrated, but it will be accepted. The Pope's half measure reveals the Catholic Church's biggest that has grown so divisive that any decisive action in either direction would cause a large-scale migration. If Hutride prohibited the traditional Mass, millions of Catholics who are traditionalist would probably take a cue from the Orthodox churches and dissociate themselves from Rome as a whole. If he approved of it in full, progressive Catholics will charge him with forsaking the Vatican to reforms and reversing the clock on decades of advancement in society. However, the horrifying truth is that the Pope is unwilling to accept the solution of compromise called actually quicken the division itself. It is attempting to avoid conventionalist being offered makes Catholics feel deceived. Crumbs rather than complete acknowledgement. Progressive Catholics experience anxiety, never the legitimacy of any actions they believe to be regressive. The central footing that appeared to be so secure space has proven to be a no man's domain, a place where everyone feels like an adversary. The worldwide response to the Pope's remarks have demonstrated how these divisions are deep. In certain parishes, the declaration has resulted in actual physical altercations between both conventional and forward-thinking Catholics. Priests have quit, instead offered into effect policies they think about either overly lenient or too restrictive. Whole congregations have broken up. With families selecting various parishes according to their religious preference. Just the financial ramifications are the Catholic Church is dependent, and on its members' contributions to all expenses are covered by the local church operations to international humanitarian efforts. When Catholics experience estrangement from their church's guidance, they cast their votes using their what. There have already been reports of notable declines in donations in where the conventional Mass has either prohibited or reluctant lialud under stringent guidelines. However, the most disastrous effect isn't spiritual as well as pecuniary. Catholic Youths who are attracted to the conventional Mass frequently symbolize as some of the most dedicated and passionate people from their generation. They are not only sentimental about the past they never had any experience, they are looking for something genuine and significant in a world that frequently seems superficial and throwaway. When the Church sends out mixed indications of their spiritual preference, it goes beyond simply dismissing their clumsy decisions. It's doubting the reliability of their masked profound religious encounters. Additionally, the Pope's remarks have shown thought lines between generations inside the Catholic Church. A large number of elderly Catholics, those that reside in Vatican II, see any return to customary methods as a denial of the advancements they battled for so difficult to do. They recall the as an authoritarian church, the pre-Vatican II exclusive, with a priestly majority and apathy on the part of lay people. The Latin in their minds, Mass stands for all. They want to conquer. In contrast, a large number of younger Catholics hold about the customary Mass seat as a haven from the mayhem and the unpredictability of modern life. They are drawn to its perception, after ability, and its relationship to its unreserved acceptance of transcendence and mystery. For them, the contemporary Mass frequently feels similar to a product from its era, dating back to the 1960s and 1970s in a manner that it feels less timeless than the old it replaced the liturgy. Theological, this situation has far-reaching repercussions. Beyond liturgical questions, the essential inquiry into whether divine revelation is anything that is flexible enough to shifting cultural conditions, or if it stands for timeless truths, something needs to be kept safe regardless of pressures of today. The convention represents a specific comprehension of the connection between God and humanity, one that highlights the surpassing the divine, the need to approach God in fair and shaking, as well as the significance of worship of sacrifice. The contemporary Mass, by contrast, conveys a distinct theological focus, which emphasizes God's imminent arrival, the potential for seeing the divinity in everyday situations, significance of human experience, involvement of the community in worship. In comparison, contemporary Mass exhibits a distinct theological focus, one that emphasizes God's imminent arrival, the potential for spiritual encounters in typical human life, and the significance of community involvement in worship. These are more than simply different fashions, their worldviews differ. Many perspectives on the God's character and the intent of religious activity. Pope Leo XIV's 14th effort to make accommodations both strategies inside one church structure might be nearly difficult. How do you uphold theological consistency when using your liturgical technicus repront, contrasting presumptions regarding what is the essence of worshipping God? How are you maintain the unity of your doctrine when the converse is true with ceremonial statements? Directions. The global aspect of this situation provides an additional level of complexity. Catholicism is a worldwide organization that needs to strike a balance in some way. Catholics' cultural inclinations in Europe, the Americas, Asia, and Africa would make sense in the perspective of Europe, where a lot of Catholics are interested. Customary methods as a reaction to secularization could be entirely unsuitable in an African setting where indigenization is well as cultural adjustment. This is reflected in the Pope's statement. Worldwide Balancing Act. However, it also shows how impossible it is to create a universally applicable solution to what are essentially distinct cultural and spiritual requirements. The customary Mass, the debate is unfolding in a different way in many global locations, with some areas demonstrating a high level of support for ancient customs, whereas some consider them as unimportant or even dangerous. Behind each of these useful there is a deeper question behind considerations. It strikes at the core of religion authority in and of itself. Who is entitled to decide how God ought to be revered? Does liturgy something that the Pope can alter, or does it symbolize a holy deposit that needs to be precisely maintained as it arrived? The customary Mass there is more than only Latin versus colloquial languages. It concerns the origin and scope of religious power. Catholic traditionalists frequently quarrel the hierarchy of the Church has exceeded its jurisdiction by liturgy techniques that were formed over ages of organization. The post-Vatican II is visible. Modifications not as valid reforms but as inventions that go beyond the appropriator restricts on papal authority. From this viewpoint, the 14th statement of Pope Leo is an effort to go back and validate modifications that were never legitimately permitted in the first place. Conversely, progressive Catholics claim that the ecclesiastical leadership has not simply the duty but also the right to adjust liturgy procedures to evolving conditions. They observe opposition to Vatican II reforms as an opposition to acceptable leadership and an effort to enslave the Church to antiquated resudas. According to this viewpoint, the PP's statement is too group-friendly, that are basically rebellious against the proper authority of the Church. The effects of this authority on the mind. One should not undervalue a crisis. Catholics have grown up believing in papal teachings, infallibility, and the authority of religion. When various Catholics arrive at conflicting conclusions regarding the legitimacy of the same papal declaration, the whole religious authority structure starts to degrade the Pope's ability to be unfailing if his choices fulfill nobody and leave everybody wondering his judgment. This lack of trust goes beyond liturgical inquiries to basic moral and religious concerns. Catholics cannot rely on their church leadership to make informed choices regarding how one ought to worship God. How can they have faith in the same leadership on issues of ethics, doctrine, and spiritual direction? The customary mass controversy has come to represent wider worries regarding the course and the ability of church leadership. Pope Leo XI's 14th birthday was covered by the media. Statement has mostly overlooked these deeper ramifications, instead concentrating on the political dynamics. At the surface level, Afro Catholic groups, however, the who wins or loses isn't the real story. These days, papal declarations are instantly put through a thorough examination by Catholic bloggers, thinkers, and activists with potentially disparate points regarding their importance and consequences. The Pope's effort to make things work in the conventional mass issue illustrated snowed of this altered media cernlings, but it also shows the constraints of attempting to control religious dispute in the era of social media. The language of compromise that was most likely intended to reduce instead controversy has given ammunition that can be claimed by all parties. Validation while expressing the stick with the outcome. As this crisis is still developing, the essential query is still whether the Catholic Church is able to stay united and consistency while taking into account the radically dissimilar spiritual requirements and the liturgy tastes of its world with appetition. Pope Leo XI's 14th declaration is one effort to deal with this lang, but preliminary evidence indicated it might have prompted additional inquiries than it responded. The stakes were too high to be greater. Among these is the Catholic Church, the oldest and biggest in the world organizations with more than 1 billion members and significant impact on the world affairs. Its capacity to preserve internal cohesion while adjusting to evolving conditions has significant ramifications, not only for Catholics but for the general public connection between religious customs and as well as contemporary culture. The customary mass controversy could appear to be a minor issue. Rambling discussion with outside observers. However, it truly serves as one of the biggest obstacles that against faith in the 21st century. How do places of worship maintain fundamental identity while staying pertinent to believers today? How do they pay tribute to their past customs while attending to the spiritual requirements of the younger generations? How do they keep the world together while honoring regional diversity? There are no simple answers to these questions, and Pope Leo XI's 14th declaration implies that even the most seasoned religious leaders are having trouble locating feasible answers. The strategy of compromise that was evident in his statement might be the most accessible choice in a challenging. However, it also emphasized underlying conflicts that are dragging the Catholic Church in various directions. In Strex, the final assessment of the Pope's approach will determine if it truly succeeds in keeping the Church together while permitting for the diversity of liturgy. If Catholic traditionalists believe that the limitations and recommendations stated in the statements are excessively onerous, they may determine that a break with Rome is better than reluctant tolerance. If Catholics who are progressive believe that annulling for customary practice as consuetus, a violation of Vatican II. Reforms, they might stop backing them from the leadership of the Church. The following few years and months will show whether the 14th statement of Pope Leo I is art, masterful use of diplomatic compromise, or a well-meaning choice that intentionally quickened the very it was intended to heal divisions. Are you interested in this story? Matters a great deal. Distribute this video to all of your acquaintances. Post a comment with what do you think this means for the Christianity's future and struck that notification bell. As this tale is far from finished, the choices made in the upcoming months will be remembered for a long time, and you have the opportunity to participate in the dialogue that determines the future of faith itself. The Vatican might believe this story can be controlled by it, but that truth always manages to surface, and by working together, we can ensure that the shocking story of Pope Leo I's 14th statement is spread throughout